So a warm welcome to all, especially the MREAC board members. This is, you may remember, the second YouTube program to bring the membership up to date based upon the lack of actual face-to-face meetings during COVID-19. We hope that changes for the fall of 2021, but that still remains to be seen somewhat, but we're hoping for the best on that. I'm going to be reporting on the pursuits of 2021 here. You'll see there's some significant changes, but I'll report on that later in the project. So we hope you enjoy, and I'll go on to the list of projects now. So here we look at the projects that we're engaged in for 2021. Somewhat shorter list than in 2020 as a result of some of these others falling off the horizon, but that's working out well for us, in fact. The oddity, perhaps, a couple in this list, the Rishabukta watershed has really launched into a significant program. We have two folks down on the Rishabukta involved in part-time basis, engaged in these projects, and they're completing some temperature monitoring, some bacterial monitoring, and some shoreline cleanup. I'm actually engaged in this on occasion, which is a pleasure for me, being that's my backyard as well. The oddity at the bottom of this, having to do with zoonotic diseases, is a spin-off from that Lyme disease study we reported on last year. So it's a bit different, and I'll expand on that in a slide later on. We have the blessing of the executive of MREAC, I assure you, to pursue the Rishabukta watershed activities, and that has a financial benefit to our organization here on the Miramichi as well. I have three different presenters, including myself, as we deliver this program, so that'll add some color to it. So we hope you enjoy it, and happy to report it is under half an hour. So we'll carry on into the first project. Well, I almost hate to take you this far back, but where we left off with the last program, we hadn't quite finished off the snow and ice season for 2021, and here as the final pH monitoring we were doing up at NORAD Bridge, and here Tim in action, I believe, as we see him lowering the sampler over the side. Here we have the downstream shot from NORAD Bridge. I just throw this in because it really captures kind of the mood of this particular day and the charm of engaging in some of these activities despite the fact that it's winter monitoring. Had we reported on flooding at the spring of 2021 when we during our last program. So here we have a couple of examples of flooded areas, this one being the Johnson Bridge on the northwest Miramichi. And although the road itself was not damaged, we do generally have pretty significant flooding here, despite the fact that it wasn't a high year for flooding problems. The second flooding we can report on happened here on Porter's Cove Road, leading up to the bridge beyond the flooding scene there of the southwest Miramichi. This location is just downstream of the community of Boys Town, and so it's somewhat of a stretch upriver. We're now going to turn our attention to some of the events and occurrences on the Rishabukta watershed. My son Neil is going to narrate that portion.
As sponsored by the Environmental Trust Fund, we've been gathering some data from the Rishabukta River system. We see on the map here 10 different locations of data loggers represented. With these data loggers, we have all the major tributaries of the Rishabukta represented. Here's the location on the West Branch where we installed one of these temperature loggers. The logger is in a rock bake, which is already submerged in this picture. Rather than relying exclusively on the GPS coordinates to retrieve these loggers in the fall, we have them attached to ropes coming up out of the water, as you can probably just barely see in this picture here. There are a few different things that we consider when it comes to placing these loggers. We want the access to the location to be reasonable for us, so we'll often choose a location near a bridge. But at the same time, we try to make these as inconspicuous as possible so that some curious fisher person doesn't pull it up out of the water and maybe add the logger to their personal collection of oddities. So we often end up doing a bit of bushwhacking or waiting to install the logger in a discrete location. Again, in the interest of making things inconspicuous, I'm here trying to affix the top end of a rope to the bridge wall, but as low in the water as possible, and thus I'm hammering a spike to which the rope will eventually be attached just under the water surface. I'm standing next to a deep hole as we're installing these loggers in the springtime. With the spring's higher water, we want to be reasonably sure that they'll remain submerged throughout the summer, and so we look for a bit of depth to place these loggers into. This logger placement here is a bit of an exception for us. I believe it's the only one that we placed under a bridge. Comparable to the Miramichi Swim Watch endeavor, we have 8 sites here where we test for E. coli and total coliform. These sites use many of the same access points where we installed the loggers depicted earlier. We again have the major tributaries of the Rishabukto system covered here. Here's Quinn Cloud at work, taking one of these samples. Quinn and I have been running around to these 8 sites to collect these samples. You can see him using the pole sampler there. You want to dip that jar in at least 3 times to rinse it out before collecting your actual sample. The days we've taken these samples, we've been running the samples directly up to the Miramichi to use the little lab setup right there at MREAC in order to do the E. coli total coliform test. Here we have another Environmental Trust Fund sponsored project on the Rishabukto system, a shoreline cleanup. This is just as much an initiative of a certain Serge Godet, who owns the Aquador Oyster Company, which operates on the Rishabukto system. Serge is very conscious of any potential environmental impacts of the oyster industry, so he was more than happy to join in this endeavor by providing us with the equipment that we needed, most notably a boat, and also he was able to deal with the resulting collected debris, receiving that back at his operation. Some of this stuff may be reusable by the oyster industry. Here's a better view of the boat that we borrowed from Serge. All in all, the oyster industry exists rather symbiotically with the river system, but there can nonetheless be some resulting flotsam and jetsam escaping the operation. Serge runs quite a tidy operation himself, but he's interested in cleaning up debris resultant from the industry generally, and of course there's a good amount of shoreline garbage to be cleaned up unrelated to the oyster industry in addition. Here we see Quinn coming at us with some debris that he found. The north shore of the Rishabukto, which is where we were working, tends to be where the debris washes up due to the prevailing summer winds, and that also happens to be the southern extremity of Kushbugwak National Park. There was a little bit of red tape to deal with in order to have an external crew such as ourselves come in to work on parkland, but Daniel Gallant, the park ecologist, helped us take care of that. Both times we were out, it was near high tide, so that made our navigation fairly safe and easy. Here's Quinn and myself and Bailey, and you can see that the boat is starting to fill up at this point. There's Bailey hard at work. This is a little ways up the St. Charles River. We encountered this bear on our first outing. The bear was probably surprised to see us there. People generally don't frequent this section of shoreline. It's completely undeveloped national park land. There's no access to it other than by boat, and there aren't any sandy beaches here to speak of, so there's not much of a draw to people. It's a good place for wildlife, thus, because it's relatively undisturbed, except by the occasional shoreline cleaner-uppers, such as us. Here's a picture from the end of that first outing with us proudly standing in front of our beautiful debris. So here you can see with the green line the route that we took by boat over the course of this shoreline cleanup. Here is the mouth of the Rishabukto River, just about to flow out into the Northumberland Strait here. Very close to the mouth of the Rishabukto is a tributary of the Rishabukto, the St. Charles River. It's up the St. Charles right here that Serge Gaudet has his Operation Aquador. So starting out from there, on the first day we started right up at the mouth of the Rishabukto, working inland, getting about this far maybe the first day, and then the next outing picking up where we left off. All in all, this is about 8 or 9 kilometers of shoreline that we managed to tidy up. And all of this shoreline, as you can see, is shoreline of Kuşbukak National Park. Once again, here's our total haul from that first outing, representing about 4 kilometers of shoreline there. And here's our somewhat more modest collection from our second outing, representing again about another 4 kilometers of shoreline. So that's the end of this segment. Next we'll be heading back to the Miramichi watershed.
Thank you, Neil. So another one of our long-standing programs now, getting into lake monitoring for many years now, and here we had a spectacular start to the season of 2021. Our first outing here to Mullen Stream Lake, and what a day it was. The shot here of that same day, this scene on Mullen Stream Lake, like paddling into the heavens. Next in our lake monitoring agenda is a visit to Main Kennedy Lake. This scene shows us going into the second Fowler Lake from where we park on a new portage trail, and happily this trail is 200 meters shorter than the original, courtesy of Mr. Robert Doyle, who found a way to do this. So kudos to Mr. Doyle. The reason Mr. Doyle was able to shorten that portage is that this canal is picked up somewhat earlier on this feeder stream into Second Fowler Lake, and we can actually cover that small stream courtesy of the beavers by about 200 meters, so that really paid off. And again, a short video here. And finally arrived on Main Kennedy Lake, the location where we put our monitor. We have this stereotypical Canadian wilderness scene here, and this is as wilderness as it gets in New Brunswick, but a beautiful day in a beautiful area. This slide a reminder of the kind of monitoring we do with these lake temperature loggers. The distribution of 5 loggers throughout the surface to the bottom of the lake, in this case an 18-foot lake, but our lakes extend to 25 feet in the case of Miramichi Lake. The profile of the temperatures can be quite interesting depending on the nature of the lake, the weather conditions, and other factors that apply to the lake physical environment. This is a particularly well done bathymetry map of Miramichi Lake, one of the 4 lakes that we do monitor with our temperature loggers. You can see the deep point here, the 25-foot mark on the bottom right,
And that, of course, is our choice of where we would log in this lake. This map was developed by DNR in anticipation, of course, of that much work that's going on Miramichi Lake to try to eradicate smallmouth bass.
The scene here is Vlad and my son Neil, actually, Neil being a volunteer on this occasion, installing the real-time monitoring station on the southwest Miramichi. Normally, we would be introducing the station on the Little Southwest and the Northwest as well, but this year, as a result of reduced funding from DFO in support of this program, we are reduced to one station on the Southwest Miramichi. We'll now turn our attention to the Swim Watch program, and our student for the summer, Bailey Fillmore, is going to take that away.
The Swim Watch program has been continuously monitoring 18 locations all over the Miramichi River from 1993 until now. 7 sites are tested weekly for E. coli, total coliform, and water quality monitoring. Our other 11 locations are tested once a month in the warm season, due to these locations always yielding very positive water quality results. Therefore, there isn't a need to test them weekly like the other spots. At some of our locations, like Hay Island, it's very important to get water quality results because this is in very close proximity to the local oyster farm. Oysters are eaten raw by people, so it's very important to have the highest quality water when growing them. The Swim Watch program continues to monitor sites like Barnaby River swimming hole to ensure that it's safe for a general public to swim in and generally enjoy the water. Now back to Harry about the Atlantic Salmon Conservation Report.
Thank you, Bailey, for that report. As mentioned, we are now engaged in a Atlantic salmon conservation strategy this year on the Black River. And for the last several years, we've had support from the Atlantic Salmon Conservation Foundation for these smaller waterways. And each year we engage in one, we find that we really fall in love with a particular waterway in question. As is our practice, we try to get out early in the season to do a reconnaissance of each of these waterways. And this was an occasion where 3 of us, Mr. Humes, Vlad, and myself, ended up pulling down the much of the navigable part of the Black River. En route, a fairly significant tributary to the Black, this being Wells Brook, as I recall, and we've just poked our canoes sort of into the bottom of Wells Brook as we have a view upstream here. Habitat assessment is one of the deliverables required for our strategies on these smaller waterways. Here we're doing a habitat assessment of a full kilometer stretch on the main branch of the Black River. We have a team here, and we work our way upstream for a full kilometer before the process is complete. A protocol developed initially by a combination of DFO staff and the provincial and DNR staff. So this cheery team just completed the 1 kilometer habitat assessment reach on this time the Little Black River, and we have 2 volunteers. Right here we have Julie, who is a colleague of Bailey in the center, my student. They are both attending the 2nd year this year for the NBCC Environmental Tech Program. Adam on the left happens to be Bailey's boyfriend. We continue to be very pleased with the effectiveness of these waste line and lead collectors that we have distributed throughout the Miramichi. Again, the focus is on the straight bass activity, and we continue to be very successful in collecting waste materials in these units. In managing and cleaning out these units, I happen to be visiting Middle Island on this particular occasion. The fellow on the left here, in his hand, he has a keeper, a straight bass. When I was speaking to him, he had just landed 3 straight bass on this particular point as you along the causeway to Middle Island. You see our unit there on the right, and the fellow is most complimentary of our efforts to collect this waste line. And here we have a situation where Vlad is actually clearing out the waste material from one of these particular units. And we are very pleased in this case with the results we see in the next slide. So here are the results we like to see. A collection of strictly waistline, perhaps a bit of lead, leader material, other things related to fishing. And so this is what it's all about. And again, we're most happy with the results. So here we have the various stations that we have these collectors situated at. You see that it's all distributed along the tidal waters of the Miramichi here, where we have very active striped bass fishing. We actually have stations over in Tabzentak at this point in time as well, and first time for this season, we have now introduced these collectors to the Rishabakto, as the next slide will show. 5 locations on this map indicate the locations of 5 different waistline collectors we have now on the Rishabakto. The one on the right here, Rishabakto Cape, is a very active station, and we've collected it a couple of times and are very happy with the success we're now seeing in this area. After spawning, the striped bass, of course, return to the Rishabakto and many other waterways, and the fishing activity can be quite intense in this area as well. Quinn here is helping to install the station here at the Rishabakto Marina. We're very pleased to get permission to do this at the marina. A lot of the boats go out with the very purpose of striped bass fishing these days during the appropriate seasons, and this has certainly heightened awareness and the need to control our waste more effectively. So we'll now turn our attention to our seagrass net program in the following slides. Another rather idyllic day to be undertaking a seagrass monitoring station at the Oak Point area here. We had a large team. We have the MREAC team, and then we have the Tabzentak and Eskanovidich crew, all helping us do the monitoring at the Oak Point site. It has been an extremely different year in 2021 with the seagrass monitoring. You see from this slide from a few years ago that all of the lines were established within the seagrass bed at the Oak Point site here. This year, however, we have a very different scenario where the boundary line is roughly somewhere between the A line and the B line here, roughly there. And so a real setback in terms of the habitat for the eelgrass. We attributed this possibly to the post-tropical storm, but we can't be certain on that. So this is our seagrass station at the Bartybogue Island site, McDonald Farm on the top of the scene here, and so we paddle across to the island and establish our site here. This has been a widgeon grass site, almost strictly widgeon grass. This year, the site is almost void of any seagrass. Certainly, widgeon grass is gone. There are remnants of eelgrass remaining, but it must have been remnants thereof. We attribute that, again, likely to the post-tropical storm SD, but once again, we can't be sure of it. So again, a very different year in terms of eelgrass monitoring. Our final station here is on the Rishabakto, the seagrass station near Indian Island. Same thing applied here. We have the 3 lines there, A, B, and C, and again the A line was pretty much void of eelgrass on this particular year due to whatever has caused that reduction in the boundary of seagrass. So things to be of particular note and interest next year. We'll now turn our attention to the AEI monitoring program, the second year of that. During the second year of the AEI, that Atlantic Ecosystem Initiative program, we are monitoring nutrients and bacteria once again. The program involves 8 different organizations, 6 of which on the eastern shore of New Brunswick and the 2 on pre-EI. The Miramichi continues to stand out very well in terms of the low impact of nutrients and bacteria, comparatively speaking, and we trust that will be the case as we continue with this program into this year. Sampling for AEI parameters on the Northwest Miramichi, we here have Bailey, my student on the right, and a keen volunteer. This is Faith Trekovich, Vlad's daughter. And so again, appreciating our volunteers. Down on the Rishabakto, the AEI sampling continues there as well. Here, Quinn Cloud is taking some parameters while they're on their outing to collect samples from about 8 different stations. The final project slide I'll mention here has to do with, as written, biting bugs, rodents, and roadkill, having to do with a study into zoonotic disease. We remember last year that we were actively involved in collecting ticks, or trying to collect ticks for Lyme disease, and based upon that, we have a follow-up this year by the same professor at Mount Allison University, Dr. Vette Lloyd, gave us a small amount of funding to collect, if we could, those things mentioned. The reason being that we have these zoonotic diseases, such as Lyme disease, and in fact, COVID-19, also a zoonotic disease. The reason for this slide is my cat has been a main contributor thus far to the collection of rodents in my particular area. So kudos to Pino here, who is contributing to the program. So that is a wrap having to do with the project review. It's been a busy summer, as perhaps you've perceived from that. Particularly busy with some of the significant developments over this past few months. Our administrator, Melanie Gallant, after 21 years, has found a full-time job at NBCC Miramichi. So the administration side, we are hoping it can continue without too serious an impact. Melanie will not leave us in the lurch, but for all intents and purposes, she has gone to this new job, and we may be looking for an administrator fairly quickly on that, on a part-time basis at least. Vlad likewise has gone to a gig with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. As per last year, he's doing some culvert work on the watershed, which of course is a benefit to our Miramichi area. But there's a gap there, but he expects to return come November. So in the meantime, we seem to be managing with volunteers and summer students on the Miramichi. We're doing okay. On the Rishabakto, we have part-time lads working on the various projects underway down there. So we're managing, in fact, continuing to enjoy it all, and we hope that will persist well into the fall, and at least until we meet again. Hoping for October, we'll see what the conditions will allow, and if we can, we will not have a meeting, but have a party at an AGM, but bring you up to date on other events at that time. So all the best in the meantime, and we look forward to meeting you soon, we hope. Ta for now.